What if one of the most important American quarters ever made is sitting in your coin jar right now, and you don't even realize what you're looking at? Imagine finding a quarter dated 1965 and thinking it is just another old coin worth 25 cents. But this particular year marks one of the biggest changes in the history of American coinage. It was the year America moved away from the traditional silver quarter and entered the modern clad era. And here's where things get even more interesting. Some 1965 Washington quarters can be far more desirable than ordinary examples because of their condition, special strikes, double die varieties, or extremely unusual minting errors. So before you spend a 1965 quarter, stop for a moment and take a closer look. Today on Hardest Penny, we're going deep into the history, design, composition, varieties, and potential value of the 1965 Washington quarter dollar. This is not simply another quarter from the 1960s. This coin represents a major turning point in American money, and some examples have become fascinating collectibles. 1965 Washington quarter dollar. The 1965 Washington quarter is one of the most historically significant coins in the entire Washington quarter series. Why? Because 1965 was the first year that the United States Mint produced Washington quarters using the new copper-nickel clad composition. Before 1965, Washington quarters were made from 90% silver. But rising silver prices and the increasing cost of producing silver coins created serious problems for the United States Mint. The government needed a cheaper alternative that could still function effectively in everyday commerce. The solution was the clad coin. The new 1965 quarter was made with outer layers containing 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper center. The coin weighs approximately 5.67 grams and measures about 24.3 millimeters across, with the familiar reeded edge that collectors recognize immediately. This change was not just a small adjustment to the quarter. It marked the beginning of a completely new era. The Coinage Act of 1965 was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson on July 23, 1965. The transition from silver to clad coinage was part of the government's response to the changing economics of precious metals. Interestingly, production of 1965 dated clad quarters began on August 23, 1965, and continued into July of 1966. So when you hold a 1965 Washington quarter, you're holding a coin from a remarkable transition period in American history. There's another detail that makes this coin especially interesting. You might look at 1965 quarter and wonder, where's the mint mark? The answer is that you normally won't find one. During this period, the United States Mint suspended mint marks in an attempt to discourage people from hoarding coins based on where they were produced. So a regular 1965 Washington quarter does not have a P, D, or S mint mark. That means you should not automatically assume that every 1965 quarter without a mint mark came from Philadelphia. The story is more complicated. Philadelphia and Denver were both involved in producing regular business strike coins during the transition, while the San Francisco SA office also produced special mint set quarters without mint marks. This is one reason collectors have to understand the difference between a normal circulation strike and a special mint set example. The regular 1965 quarter had a huge production run. PCGS lists the regular 1965 quarter mintage at approximately 1,819,717,540 pieces. With such a massive production number, the ordinary circulated 1965 quarter is not considered a rare coin. And this is where many online coin videos can become misleading. You may see claims that every 1965 quarter is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. That is simply not true. A normal, heavily circulated 1965 clad quarter is generally a common coin. Its historical importance is much greater than its ordinary face value. But collectors know that the word common does not mean worthless. Condition can make a major difference. Think about how many 1965 quarters were used in everyday commerce. They were placed into vending machines, cash registers, pockets, purses, and coin jars. Over the decades, many became scratched, worn, stained, and damaged. Finding a 1965 quarter with exceptionally clean surfaces, strong luster, and sharp details is much more difficult than finding an ordinary worn example. This is why high-grade 1965 quarters can attract serious collector attention. PCGS records examples in very high grades, including an MS-68 regular strike example, and the auction record listed by PCGS for the regular issue is $12,650. That does not mean your average 1965 quarter is worth anywhere near that amount. It demonstrates how dramatically condition and rarity within a grade can affect the value of a coin. And now we come to another exciting part of the story: varieties. Some 1965 Washington quarters are known with double die characteristics. PCGS lists multiple varieties, including double die obverse examples and a double die reverse variety. One of the more dramatic varieties shows noticeable doubling on features such as "In God We Trust," "Liberty," the date, and portions of Washington's profile. This is exactly why you should never look at a 1965 quarter only once. Take a good quality coin and examine it under proper lighting. Look closely at the lettering. Study the date. Examine Liberty. Look at "In God We Trust." Then compare the coin with a normal 1965 quarter. Genuine double die varieties can show distinct characteristics that are different from ordinary machine doubling or damage. And don't forget the reverse. Collectors also recognize a 1965 double die reverse variety. This means that the unusual characteristic can appear on the back of the coin rather than the front. These varieties can be considerably more interesting to collectors than a normal 1965 quarter. There is another version that many people overlook: the 1965 Special Mint Set quarter. The Mint did not produce a traditional regular annual mint set in 1965. Instead, it produced special mint sets. The 1965 Special Mint Set included a quarter along with other denominations and was specifically made for collectors. Approximately 2.3 million 1965 SMS quarters were produced. These coins were struck using specially prepared dies and often have a distinctive satin-like or proof-like appearance with sharper details than ordinary circulation strikes. This creates an interesting situation for collectors. Two coins can both say 1965 and have no mint mark, yet they may be different types of strikes. The SMS quarter can be especially desirable when it has exceptional surfaces or a cameo appearance. PCGS records high-grade SMS examples, including coins reaching SP68 and SP68 plus levels. So if you have a 1965 quarter that looks unusually sharp, almost like it was specially made for collectors, don't immediately assume it is just an ordinary circulation coin. There is also one extremely important warning for coin hunters. Do not assume that every 1965 quarter is silver. Because 1965 is the first year of the clad quarter, some people mistakenly believe that a 1965 quarter with a silver appearance must contain silver. The normal 1965 quarter is clad, with copper and nickel outer layers over a copper center. However, genuine wrong metal or transitional errors involving the 1965 date can be extremely interesting and potentially valuable. If you believe your coin might be made from the wrong composition, don't clean it, scratch it, or damage it in an attempt to test it. Professional examination and proper weighing are much safer approaches. And that brings us to one of the biggest rules in coin collecting. Never clean a potentially valuable coin. A shiny coin may look more attractive to someone who doesn't collect coins, but cleaning can leave scratches and unnatural surfaces that serious collectors do not want. If your 1965 quarter looks old, dirty, toned, or dull, leave it alone. Its original surface is part of its history. So, what should you look for if you find a 1965 Washington quarter? Start with the date. Then check whether the coin is a normal circulated example or something that looks unusually sharp. Examine the lettering and date for possible doubling. Look carefully at the reverse. Inspect the rim and edge for major minting abnormalities. If the coin looks unusual, compare it with known examples, and consider having it authenticated by a professional grading service. And most importantly, remember that a coin's value is determined by the specific coin, not simply by the year printed on it. A heavily worn 1965 quarter is common. A high-grade example is more interesting. A recognized double-die variety can be much more desirable. A genuine special mint set example can have collector value. And a rare, authenticated mint error can potentially be something entirely different. That is what makes the 1965 Washington quarter such an exciting coin to search for. It is not just about money. This little piece of metal tells the story of an important moment in American history. It represents the end of the traditional silver quarter era and the beginning of the clad era that continues in American coinage today. So the next time a 1965 Washington quarter lands in your hand, don't spend it automatically. Turn it over. Look at the date. Study the surfaces. Examine the lettering. Check the edge. Ask yourself whether you're looking at an ordinary circulation strike, a high-grade survivor, an SMS example, a double-die variety, or something even more unusual. Because sometimes the most interesting coins aren't the ones that look spectacular at first glance. Sometimes they're the coins that look ordinary until someone takes the time to really examine them. And that's exactly what we do here at Hardest Penny. We search through the coins that other people overlook. We study the dates, the minting history, the varieties, and the tiny details that can turn an ordinary-looking piece of pocket change into a fascinating collectible. The 1965 Washington quarter may have a face value of just 25 cents, but its story is worth much more than that. So check your old coin jars, your collections, your drawers, and even your pocket change. If you find a 1965 quarter, don't assume it's worthless just because millions were made. Take a closer look because the right condition, the right variety, or a genuine mint error can completely change the story. This is Hardest Penny. And remember, never underestimate an old coin just because it looks ordinary. The smallest details can sometimes reveal the biggest treasures. What if I told you that a quarter sitting in your pocket right now could be more interesting than it looks? Most people see a quarter, recognize George Washington, and immediately think, it's only 25 cents. But coin collectors know that the date, mint mark, condition, and even tiny imperfections can completely change the story of an ordinary-looking coin. Today on Hardest Penny, we are taking a close look at a Washington quarter that has been hiding in American coin collections and pocket change for decades. We are talking about the 1984 Washington quarter dollar. At first glance, it may look like nothing more than a common quarter from the 1980s. But before you spend one, there are several things you should know. Could a high-quality example be worth more than face value? Could an unusual mint error make one especially desirable? And what exactly should you look for if you discover a 1984 quarter in your old coin jar? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will know exactly why collectors still pay attention to this fascinating coin. 1984 de Washington Carte Dollar. The 1984 Washington quarter was produced at the Denver Mint in Colorado, and the small letter D beneath Washington's portrait identifies its mint of origin. The Washington quarter itself has a long history in the United States. It was first introduced in 1932 as a commemorative issue honoring the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Although the design has changed over the decades, the familiar portrait of Washington became one of the most recognizable images on American coins. The 1984 quarter belongs to the classic copper and nickel clad era. This means that unlike the earlier silver Washington quarters, this coin does not contain the traditional 90% silver composition used on quarters produced before 1965. The 1984 quarter is made with a copper core surrounded by layers containing copper and nickel. It has the familiar reeded edge and the standard size and weight associated with the Washington quarter series of that period. On the obverse, you will see George Washington facing left. Above his portrait is the word Liberty, while In God We Trust appears to the left. The date, 1984, is positioned below Washington, and the small D mint mark can be found near the lower portion of the design. On the reverse, you will see the American bald eagle with its wings spread wide. Around the eagle are the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and quarter dollar. Now, here's where things become interesting. The 1984 D quarter was produced in very large numbers, which means that the average example is not considered a rare coin. Millions of these quarters entered circulation, and many are still found today in collections, coin jars, old cash drawers, and pocket change. Because of this, simply owning a 1984 D quarter does not mean you have a valuable treasure. But that does not mean you should ignore it. One of the first things you should examine is the condition of your coin. Condition can make an enormous difference in the world of coin collecting. A quarter that has been circulating for 40 years may have scratches, dents, discoloration, flattened details, and contact marks. These characteristics are normal for circulated coins. But occasionally, a coin escapes circulation in remarkable condition. A 1984 D quarter with strong, original mint luster, sharp details, and very few marks can attract the attention of collectors looking for high-grade examples. Coins like this can be much more desirable than ordinary circulated pieces. The better the condition, the more carefully collectors want to examine the coin. However, there's an important point to remember. High grade does not automatically mean extremely valuable. A common coin can still be common even when it is in excellent condition. Value depends on rarity, demand, grade, eye appeal, and whether the coin possesses an unusual characteristic. This brings us to one of the most exciting possibilities: mint errors. A genuine mint error can transform a normal-looking quarter into a much more interesting collectible. Errors can occur during different stages of the minting process. A coin might be struck off-center, struck on an incorrect planchet, have a major die problem, or display another abnormality created at the mint. For example, an off-center strike occurs when the coin is not properly aligned with the dies during striking. The result can be a dramatic shift in the design, with part of the coin's surface left blank. The more significant and obvious the error, the more attention it may receive from collectors. But this is also where beginners need to be extremely careful. Not every damaged quarter is a mint error. A coin that has been hit by a machine, squeezed, scratched, drilled, heated, chemically treated, or intentionally modified can look unusual. Post-mint damage is extremely common, especially on coins that have spent years in circulation. A genuine mint error must generally show characteristics consistent with an error that occurred during the manufacturing process. So if your 1984 D quarter looks strange, don't immediately assume you have found a fortune. Take a close look and compare it with another normal Washington quarter. Examine the rim, lettering, date, mint mark, portrait, and edge. If the difference appears significant and you believe it could be a genuine mint error, professional authentication may be the safest way to determine what you have. Another important factor is the surface of the coin. You might find a 1984 D quarter with attractive original luster and minimal contact marks. These coins can be especially interesting because most examples were handled extensively after leaving the mint. A coin that somehow avoided heavy circulation may stand out from the millions of ordinary examples. And there's something else that makes these coins fascinating: their age. A 1984 D quarter is now more than 4 decades old. Think about that for a moment. When this coin was struck, the United States was in the middle of the 1980s. Music, technology, cars, fashion, and everyday life looked very different from today. That little quarter has survived all of those years. It may have traveled across different states, passed through hundreds of hands, and eventually ended up in someone's collection. That historical connection is part of what makes coin collecting so enjoyable. When searching through your coins, don't focus only on the possibility of finding a coin worth thousands of dollars. Learn to appreciate the details. Look at the strike. Study the surfaces. Check the date and mint mark. Compare similar coins. The more coins you examine, the easier it becomes to recognize something unusual. You should also resist the temptation to clean your 1984 D quarter. This is one of the biggest mistakes new collectors make. A coin may look dirty or dull, but cleaning it can permanently damage its original surface. Scratches and unnatural shine caused by cleaning can make the coin less desirable to serious collectors. If you believe you have a potentially valuable coin, it is usually better to leave the surface untouched. So, how much is a 1984D Washington quarter worth? For most ordinary circulated examples, the answer is simple, generally around face value, because the coin is common. But exceptional condition, certified high grades, and genuine mint errors can change the situation. The exact value depends heavily on the specific coin. That is why you should never judge a coin's worth from the date and mint mark alone. Be especially cautious when you see dramatic claims online saying that every 1984D quarter is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Those claims can be misleading. A seller may list a common coin for an unrealistic price, but an asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed sale. Serious collectors look at actual market evidence, comparable examples, condition, and authentication. The real excitement comes from finding something that is genuinely different. Imagine opening an old jar of coins and discovering a 1984D quarter that has unusually sharp details, beautiful original surfaces, and an unusual, striking characteristic. Instead of automatically spending it, you stop and investigate. You compare it with other examples, take photographs, weigh it if necessary, and perhaps have it examined by a professional. That is how a simple piece of pocket change can turn into a fascinating collecting discovery. So the next time you see a 1984D Washington quarter dollar, don't dismiss it immediately. Check the date. Look for the D mint mark. Examine the condition. Study the edges and surfaces. Look carefully for genuine mint-made abnormalities, but remember the difference between an error and damage. The 1984D quarter may not be a rare treasure in its normal form, but it represents something much bigger, the excitement of searching. Coin collecting is not always about finding a coin worth a fortune. Sometimes it is about discovering history in your own pocket. And that's exactly what we do here on Hardest Penny. We look at ordinary coins with extraordinary curiosity, because you never know what details might be hiding in plain sight. So before you spend your next 1984D quarter, take a second look. It might simply be a common 25-cent coin, or it might be an unusually preserved example, a fascinating variety, or a genuine mint error waiting to be discovered. The only way to know is to look closely. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1984D Washington quarter, stay connected with Hardest Penny, because there are countless other coins hiding in collections, drawers, jars, and pockets across America. Some are common, some are scarce, and every once in a while, one turns out to be something truly special. Keep searching, keep learning, and most importantly, never overlook the small coins, because sometimes the smallest discoveries can tell the biggest stories. If you want, I can also make the next Hardest Penny coin script with an even stronger, you might have this coin worth $X viral style intro, while keeping the same 1,200 word, one-part format. Welcome back to Hardest Penny, the channel where ordinary looking coins can turn into surprisingly interesting pieces of American history. Today, we're taking a close look at a coin that millions of people have probably handled without ever realizing that it could be worth investigating. The 1989D Washington quarter dollar. At first glance, this quarter may look completely ordinary. It has the familiar portrait of George Washington on the front, an eagle on the reverse, and the small D mint mark showing that it was produced at the Denver Mint. But here's the question every coin hunter wants answered. Is the 1989D Washington quarter actually valuable, or is it simply another common quarter worth 25 cents? Stay with me, because in this video from Hardest Penny, we're going to examine its history, design, mintage, condition, errors, varieties, and the circumstances that could make an example much more interesting to collectors. 1989 de Washington Quarter Dollar. The 1989D Washington quarter was struck at the United States Mint facility in Denver, Colorado, during a period when the Washington quarter was already one of the most familiar coins in American circulation. The Washington quarter had been introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and by 1989 the design had become an everyday part of American commerce. The 1989D quarter continues that classic design. On the obverse, or front, you can see a portrait of George Washington facing left. The inscriptions include Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1989. Just below Washington's neck is a small D mint mark. That letter is important because it tells us that this particular coin was produced at the Denver Mint. But coin collecting is rarely that simple. One of the biggest factors affecting the value of a 1989 D Washington quarter is its condition. Most quarters from 1989 spent years circulating through stores, vending machines, banks, cash registers, and people's pockets. As a result, many examples have scratches, contact marks, worn surfaces, and dull luster. A normal circulated example is usually worth little more than its face value. However, coins that have survived in exceptionally high grades can attract collectors. A quarter that has sharp details, strong original mint luster, minimal contact marks, and excellent eye appeal is much more desirable than a heavily worn example. This is where grading becomes extremely important. Professional grading companies can assign numerical grades to coins, and high-grade examples of otherwise common coins can sometimes bring significantly more attention from collectors. This is especially true when a coin reaches the upper mint state grades. A 1989 D quarter that looks almost untouched may be far more interesting than one that has spent decades in circulation. But remember, simply calling a coin uncirculated does not automatically make it rare or extremely valuable. The actual grade, surface quality, strike, luster, and collector demand all matter. Another exciting area to investigate is mint errors. This is where a common 1989 D quarter could potentially become much more interesting. Errors happen when something goes wrong during the minting process. Examples can include off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, doubled features, missing design elements, or other unusual minting abnormalities. But there is an important warning for every coin hunter. Not every unusual-looking mark is a mint error. Many strange-looking coins are simply damaged after leaving the mint. Scratches, dents, flattened rims, machine damage, discoloration, and coins that have been deliberately altered can easily be mistaken for genuine mint errors. So if you discover a 1989 D quarter that looks different, do not immediately assume that you have found a jackpot. First, examine the coin carefully under good lighting. Compare it with a normal 1989 D quarter. Look at the lettering, date, mint mark, rim, edge, Washington's portrait, and reverse design. If something appears dramatically different and you believe it may be a genuine mint error, professional authentication can be worthwhile. Another factor that collectors should pay attention to is the mint mark itself. The D indicates Denver, while quarters produced at Philadelphia during this period generally did not carry a mint mark. The presence of the D is therefore normal for this particular coin and does not, by itself, make the quarter rare. You may also see online claims suggesting that certain 1989 D quarters are worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. This is where you need to be careful. A coin's value should never be based simply on an advertised price or an internet listing. Sellers can ask almost any amount they want, but an asking price does not necessarily mean the coin actually sold for that amount. For a realistic valuation, collectors should look at actual auction results and comparable sales, while also considering the coin's grade and whether it has a certified error or variety. A normal circulated 1989 D Washington quarter is generally a common coin. Its value can increase when the coin is in exceptional condition or possesses a genuine and desirable mint error. There's also something fascinating about this quarter that goes beyond its monetary value. Think about where this coin has been. A 1989 D quarter could have traveled through countless hands over more than 3 decades. It may have been used to buy a newspaper, pay for a meal, ride somewhere, or simply sit inside a jar of spare change. Every circulated coin has its own journey, and that history is one of the reasons coin collecting remains so fascinating. So, if you have a 1989 D Washington quarter, don't throw it away just because it is common. Take a few seconds to inspect it. Check the date. Check the D mint mark. Look at the rims and edges. Examine the lettering and design for anything unusual. Most importantly, check the condition. A clean, sharp, attractive example is always more interesting than a heavily worn one. And remember, never clean your collectible coins just to make them look shiny. Cleaning can damage the original surface and potentially reduce collector value. A natural, original coin is usually much more desirable than one that has been polished or chemically treated. So, is the 1989D Washington quarter dollar a rare treasure? In its normal form, the answer is generally no. With a production of nearly 900 million coins, it is a relatively common issue. But that does not mean you should ignore it. A superb high-grade example, an authenticated mint error, or an unusual variety can make an otherwise ordinary quarter much more interesting. And that is the real lesson behind coin hunting. You don't need every coin to be rare. You need to know what to look for. Before you spend that 1989D quarter, take another look. Maybe it is just a common 25-cent coin. Maybe it is an unusually beautiful example. Or perhaps it has a genuine minting error hiding in plain sight. The only way to know is to inspect it carefully. This is Hardest Penny, where we turn ordinary pocket change into exciting discoveries. If you enjoy finding hidden treasures in coins, don't forget to subscribe because the next coin sitting in your collection, your wallet, or even your old change jar could be the one that makes you stop and say, wait, what is this worth? Agar AP Chayan, Main ISI style May 1989D quarter Kalia Zayada suspenseful, viral YouTube voiceover style version be Bonasak Dahun, Jime Hook or Retention or Strong Ho.